Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our talks with Walt, as we're calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We are in the Calamus section, and we turn now to a little poem called To a Stranger. Now you're going to notice that we've got about 20, 21, 22 poems now remaining in the Calamus section, and there are all these little short, kind of almost like photographs or images that will just be kind of thrown up on the screen for a moment, and we'll get a sense of it. Now my assumption is you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Talks with Walt, everything from inscriptions to Live Oak, which we just finished. Let's hear from Norton's for a moment about background information. The manuscript of this poem was Calamus number 22, gives it the present title, printed in 1867 without any kind of further changes. Now I want you to watch, and this is pretty remarkable, but I want you to watch this certain kind of a dance that will happen back and forth in this poem between the pronouns I and you. Also do point out that To a Stranger is one of the few poems in Calamus that doesn't have as its first line the title of the poem, right? This is Passing Stranger with an exclamation point. By the way, the use of the word stranger here is also useful. In Song of Occupations, passage 1, we're going to hear this same kind of idea in To a Stranger. When we get to that set of lines, it will read like this. If you meet some stranger in the streets and love him or her, why, I often meet strangers in the street and love them. Now, Whitman was a great walker, as we said in our introductory set of comments, and he loved to walk through the city and to see people and to imagine what it would be like to know them, to be with them, to be friends with them, or even lovers with them, and so he's going to be playing a similar game here. Let's just read the poem now. Passing stranger. You do not know how lovingly I look upon you. You must be he I was seeking, or she I was seeking. It comes to me as of a dream. I have somewhere surely lived a life of joy with you. All is recalled as we flit by each other, fluid, affectionate, chaste, matured. You grew up with me, were a boy with me, or a girl with me. I ate with you and slept with you. Your body has become not yours only, nor left my body mine only. You give me the pleasure of your eyes, face, flesh, as we pass. You take of my beard, breast, hands in return. I am not to speak to you. I am to think of you when I sit alone or wake at night alone. I am to wait. I do not doubt I am to meet you again. I am to see to it that I do not lose you. Now, you can go ahead and start counting all of the repetitions of you and I by most people's count. You 14 times, I 12 times. So there's this dance between the you and I. This is one of those little poems that students see as a gem within Calamus. The way that the poem is spoken directly to a stranger and, of course, to you as the reader. Notice we'll begin with Passing Stranger, and we've got this exclamation point. By the way, just jot down the ways in which the word stranger gets used through Leaves of Grass. It's pretty remarkable. You do not know. That idea of not knowing is central to Leaves of Grass. We've seen this a number of times. How lovingly I look upon you. Now there's, of course, a borrowing from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet and that balcony scene where at the beginning of R&J 2, Romeo is in the backyard and he's listening to Juliet, watching Juliet. So we're obviously playing similar kinds of games here. You must be the one I was seeking. And if you'll think about it, all of Leaves of Grass has been about the quest, the seeking, right? Or she I was seeking. Now there have been readers who will say that Whitman threw this second one in, the she as opposed to the he, to try to somehow kind of clandestinely hide the fact that he was probably more interested in he's than she's. I'm going to leave stuff like that up to you and your own research with the biographers. Notice the parenthetics. It comes to me as of a dream. Will take us to one of his great poems, The Sleepers, as we'll talk about it later. I have somewhere surely lived a life of joy with you. It's a fascinating line. In other words, every single human being is somehow interconnected. And somehow or another, I've lived a life with every single one of you, and you've lived a life with every single one of me, and any other stranger that you meet. Well, think about Tennyson's great line in Ulysses, I am part of all that I have met, right? He says, I have somewhere surely lived a life of joy with you. Notice the use of the word joy in Leaves of Grass. There is no book of poems more powerfully joy-filled than Leaves of Grass, as we said. All, he loves that word, right, is recalled And then he uses this word flit. You'll remember this one from Pent Up Aching Rivers, I emerge flitting out, right? It's a great, great verb because it has that bird-like sense, right, of jumping around. I flit by each other. As we flit by each other, then you've got 4 words, right? Fluid, that is to say, everything is in movement. We think of Heraclitus, don't we, right? Affectionate, obviously. Chaste, interestingly, used 8 times in Leaves of Grass, right? And then the word matured. That is to say, it isn't just a childish kind of affection that he's playing with. And then he says something interesting. You grew up with me. Now we're going to get to this poem. There was a child went forth, and we'll point out when we hit that poem the way that Whitman argues that we're all somehow a product of our childhood and our upbringing. Freud obviously would have a lot to say about that. You were a boy with me or a girl with me, and then I ate with you, slept with you, your bodies become not yours only, nor left my body mine only. In other words, he makes this interesting argument. When you look at complete and total strangers, they were born just like you. They grew up just like you. They ate just like you. They walked and talked just like you. Even if they spoke different languages, even if they ate different foods, it doesn't matter. I mean, we're going to see this in his idea in Passage to India, the way we're all interconnected on this planet regardless. And there's something quite remarkable about that. And then he says it, you give me the pleasure of your eyes, your face, your flesh as we pass. You take of my beard, takes us back, of course, to Song of Myself, Passage 5. I told you, just like Milton, he's totally into the whole thing of hair and beards. We're going to play the same game again here. Breast, obviously, Passage 5 of Song of Myself. Hands in return. But then he says it. I am not to speak to you, I'm to think of you when I sit alone or wake at night alone. We're going to get to more of this alone stuff all the way through Calamus. We'll have this tension between being alone and being, with others, right? I am to wait. I do not now doubt I am to meet you again. In other words, there's this interesting thing where you sit on a bus or a subway or whatever, or you walk by somebody on the street and you ask, I wonder if I'll ever see them again or if that's the last encounter. Whitman says, oh, no, I'll come back, and here's why. No, even if it's not the same stranger, it'll be another stranger. And to that degree, we're all somehow brilliantly interconnected. He says, I am to see to it that I do not lose you. Now, there's been a reading of this that suggests the way that he really means this is his hope that Leaves of Grass will become that scene. In other words, in some very interesting ways, we are engaged in a dance with Whitman, as we have said a number of times previously. And Whitman is, of course, going to tell us, no, we're not strangers. We know each other in really powerful ways through the poetry. Obviously, at 2a, there is this tension between secrecy and disclosure that's always a part of the artistic venture. At 2b, again, we pointed out that there's this beautiful dance between the use of the word you and I, right? And that chance encounter that ends up feeling like a dance as you walk by somebody. I mentioned at 3a, I mentioned A Song of Occupations, but I want to here mention Plato's dialogues. Now, this will shock some of you when I say it this way, but Whitman was very influenced by Plato and the Platonic dialogues and this exchange, this give and take, if we want to call it that. And I think that you have that game being played here. Finally, at 3b, just to try and own a poem like this, who have you ever flitted by, we could ask, right? And do you have a struggle balancing the need for secrecy versus disclosure? And how do you look at complete and total strangers? Can you hold them in your gaze, in your heart, in your mind as being not a stranger, but as Whitman will say, a comrade? We're all in this together. Thank you.